Load ErrorExperts will break down team needs, watch film of the top college prospects and predict, to the best of their ability, where players will get drafted. We're going to be doing none of that in this mock draft. Here, we're going to set everything up so that the virtual GMs and coaches in Madden 21 will be making the picks for us. We've updated the rosters to reflect free agency moves and imported a custom-made draft class to represent the 2021 players. We explain all of that below. We also have the order set for the first round. Because of how complicated this is to set up, we only simulated the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. The entire draft wouldn't be accurate anyway because of compensatory picks that aren't included in Madden. First, we'll go over how this process worked. It involved a lot of setup since there's no official 2021 NFL draft class in Madden 21 yet, and rosters quit officially updating at the end of the Super Bowl. If you aren't interested in the setup of the draft, then you can click here to simply get to the results. Madden uses auto-generated draft classes in franchise mode and doesn't have an actual draft class of the 2021 players. But Madden does allow users to create their own draft class, and upload them into the community files where others can download. That's what we did in this experiment. Madden rosters quit updating at the end of the Super Bowl, which means all of the big free agency moves aren't updated. So the big Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff trade didn't happen. Jadeveon Clowney is still on the Titans and Bears QB1. Andy Dalton is still a Cowboy. But thanks to the same community files section, I was able to download an updated roster with all of the free agency moves. The rosters were updated through Wednesday, April 14th, so if any big moves happened after this, then it was missed in the simulation. However, it's not just as easy as downloading an updated roster. Because the Madden off-season begins after the draft, I had to simulate the 2020 season to get to the 2021 draft. This means a lot of players ended up becoming free agents in 2021, so I had to go through and re-sign them all to make sure they didn't leave in free agency. This is a very tedious task, so I only kept players 65 overall and higher on each team to speed up the process, so a few bottom-tier players were lost. There was also a small matter of retirements. Some active players decided to call it quits in the virtual world while their real-world counterpart continued on. To counter this, I just edited a low overall player to reflect the players who retired by changing their stats. Fun fact, one of the players who retired in-game was Julian Edelman, and he retired a day before this experiment took place in real life. To get the draft order to reflect this year's draft, I first went through the 2020 season and forced wins to replicate the actual outcome. This isn't perfect as there are a number of tiebreakers that don't come out the same, but it at least creates a baseline that sort of resembles what the order looks like. For all of the inaccurate teams, whether through a wrong tiebreaker or because the pick was traded, I simply made trades with teams until the order was accurate. Again, this simulation was done on April 14th, so any trades after that day aren't reflected. To make this possible, I had to make this an offline franchise and create a character for all 32 teams so I could manage them individually. This also helps to eliminate any random signings or releases. I did this for the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft, and the results can be viewed below. We're off to a good start. The Jaguars do what's expected in the real-life draft and take Trevor Lawrence off the board first overall. After updating the roster to send Sam Darnold to the Panthers, it was clear that quarterback was a huge need for the Jets. Their starting quarterback pre-draft is James Morgan. And with Wilson being the number 2 prospect overall, it makes sense that he goes to the Jets, which is also an expected real-life pick. This move surprised me considering the Falcons already have Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley on the roster. You'd think the virtual GM would recognize that and go a different route. Instead, they just take the best non-QB available on the big board. It's not completely out of the question, but this seems like an unlikely real-life pick. Since many mock drafts have quarterbacks going within the first 4 picks, the Bengals' debate has almost always been Sewell or Chase. Protect Joe Burrow, or give him a familiar wide receiver. Well, with both gone, the decision is a little easier and the Bengals go with star tight end Kyle Pitts. This is a realistic pick even if Sewell and Chase are both available. Pitts is a great talent, and the Bengals could use another receiving threat to help out Burrow. This is a very realistic pick for Miami considering Tua Tagovailoa would be connected with his former Alabama teammate. Many mock drafts have the Dolphins taking a wide receiver in this situation, so if Chase is already gone then it makes sense to go with the Heisman-winning Smith. Most mock drafts have the Eagles selecting a wide receiver here. But since the big names are gone, Horn is the next logical choice. And he's not a random one. The mock draft database has Horn as the number 3 most popular choice, 11%, to Philly behind Waddle and Smith. Now that we've reached the near midway point of the draft, it's time to address the elephant in the room. Justin Fields, Trey Lance and Mac Jones are all still available. And after grabbing Trevor Lawrence first overall, the Jaguars now turn to the defensive side of the ball. This is a pick that's been trendy in recent weeks. NFL.com's Daniel Jeremiah had Moerig going to Jacksonville in his latest mock draft, saying, "There are some intriguing options for the Jaguars with this pick, but Moerig is just too clean a player to pass up. Part of me wanted the Packers to go QB here just to frustrate the virtual Aaron Rodgers. Instead, they go with a more realistic pick of Wyatt Davis. Although it's not a completely wild selection, it's not one I expect Green Bay to make in real life. I'd expect a wide receiver here, potentially Rondale Moore or Terrace Marshall Jr. The Chiefs need offensive line help, and a lot of mock drafts have Kansas City going O-line here. But there have already been a number of offensive linemen drafted in this simulation, so Leatherwood ends up as one of the top options available here. Leatherwood is viewed more as a second-round guy, but considering the insane offensive lineman run, he becomes a first-round pick. The Super Bowl Shams added Antoine Winfield Jr. in last year's draft, so why not add another son of a great NFL player? Samuel is a solid pick here for the books, although most mock drafts have Tampa Bay going with a defensive lineman with this pick. But Samuel isn't a wild selection at all. We won't give detailed recaps of the second round, but since a lot of big names didn't go in the first round, we thought it'd be interesting to see how the second round turned out. Obviously, the main takeaway here is that Justin Fields, Trey Lance and Mac Jones are all available at the end of the first and second rounds. Even if one of the top teams surprise us by not going QB early on, in real life there'd most certainly be a trade by someone to select one of them before they fell to this point. Their slides were the primary reason for doing the second round simulation of the draft, and they didn't even go then. I didn't change the rest of the draft, so the picks were out of order after the second round. But at the top of the third round we finally saw the quarterbacks start to go. Justin Fields went to the Broncos in the third round. Mac Jones went to the Falcons in the third round. Trey Lance went to the Cowboys in the third round. Jamie Newman went to the Giants in the third round, and Kyle Trask went to the Patriots in the third round. Only one other QB was drafted, Felipe Franks to the Seahawks in the fourth round. Outside of the quarterback issue, though, a lot of the selections in the first round seemed plausible. There were multiple players who have been attached to the teams that they were drafted to. I thought for the most part the simulation followed the needs of the teams, outside of a handful of selections.